Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2215. The topic is Q&A, and the title is Techniques to Grow a Lagging Body Parts. We're actually going to be discussing the chest today. However, the concepts that we're going to discuss can be used for any body part. This originally the idea for the podcast came up from one of my new clients. The new client is a personal trainer. Actually, over half the clients I work with right now are personal trainers, so I really enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. It's exciting because often whenever I teach them, it gets passed on to their clients, so it's more meaningful and kind of exciting, and I enjoy that. So he wants to compete in men's classic physique either by the end of 2025 or early 2026. So we have some time, and he's mostly, the reason why he came to me, quote unquote, early in the process, because usually people come when they're wanting to start dieting for a show, and then they're like, I want to get lean, but I also want to grow this. And I'm like, well, what the hell? If you want to get lean, we have to start getting into a calorie deficit, which means we're going to have limited growth. So it's nice when I can get somebody where we actually have some off season, where they can actually be in a calorie surplus in order to grow body parts. He knew that enough, so that was great. So he gave me plenty of time. And his main focus is to grow his chest. When we started talking, and I was talking with him about what he was struggling with and what he wanted help with, we exchanged photos. Well, not we, because he just sent me them. I didn't send him any. So he sent me photos. And then I asked him for his current training program. In the photos, it was quick to see that his chest is lagging. He has much more dominant shoulders and arms, and he actually has a really good back, but his chest is definitely behind. And what we found looking at his body type is he has short upper arm bones, which is actually like what I do. And that means your triceps are going to be very dominant in presses. So any kind of chest press he does, even if it's a machine where it's a converging press, where the hands actually come slightly inward as you're pressing the machine, even in converging presses, which are more chest dominant than non-converging presses, in presses in general, compared to, say, flies or cable crossovers, his triceps are going to be very dominant. So this tells us, based on his anatomy, what exercise categories, exercise selections are going to be best. When somebody has a lagging body part, whether it's quads, hamstrings, glutes, back, biceps, whatever it might be, often the way a person is built can create some of the limitations and challenges they're facing when it comes to growing a body part. They have to select exercises that work with the body type that they have. And another example is wanting to maintain a small, streamlined physique in regards to waistline. You have to be very careful with selecting heavy, loaded compound movements, especially free weight movements like deadlifts and squats, and even like heavy walking lunges, reverse lunges, various things like that. Really, when you find somebody who has a long torso, so their hips to shoulders is kind of long for their body type, you're going to have to be very careful. There's caveats to that as well. So now I didn't have this example written down, so now I'm kind of talking through it and realizing there's a bunch of caveats. But if somebody has long femurs, that's going to create a significant hinge to their movements. And if they have long femurs and they don't have an exceptionally short torso, meaning even if it's an average torso, but they have long femurs, they're going to be loading their midsection in a hinged position, which tends to then thicken the obliques and rectus abdominis, and that's going to create a thicker midsection. So you have to be very careful in the positions that you put them in under heavy weight loads in order to minimize waistline growth. So that was a way of getting through that talking. So I'm sorry if I made that confusing, but it's just there's so many components to it that even just talking through one example, it's like, well, it depends on this, this, and this. So our body type does factor into this. This is why certain trainers, they might do certain movements that work best for them, but that doesn't mean it's going to be best for their clients. So just because you're a trainer, if you have a favorite movement, it's okay to teach that to your clients, but you need to be aware of whether that's actually the best for the client. It might be best for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's best for them. So, for example, I have short upper arm bones, so humerus bones. That means that for me, it's going to be very important for me to do a lot of isolations before my presses if I want to grow my chest. It also means if I'm doing powerlifting and strength-based training, if I want to grow my bench, I do have to have a certain minimal amount of strength in my chest. But my triceps, man, if you do a ton of tricep accessories, that's how I got my bench up over 400 in competition. So I've benched over 400 pounds in powerlifting competition, and it was because of just a ton of triceps work. Whereas if somebody has long upper arm bones, their chest is going to be much more involved in their press. So you're going to really need to emphasize chest-based accessories. They still probably going to need some triceps, but they're going to need more like, say, 50-50 type training or even 60-40 split between chest and triceps. Whereas for me, it was like 70-30 tricep favoring. So it really depends on the person's anatomy is going to factor into exercise selection. For this client, for him, having short upper arm bones, we knew meant that he would benefit from things, techniques and tricks you can use that would take the triceps out of movements as much as possible. Then in his training program, he was training his chest with a lot of presses. He was very press dominant. Most workouts were 4 exercises, 3 presses, and then an isolation to finish, like chest flies or cable crossovers or something to finish. And you'll find out soon that we basically inverted that. And most of his work was done very heavy. So sets of 5 to 10. His high reps was 10 to 12, which is comical because to me, high reps is much more than that. But most commonly, he was in the 8 to 10 range. Every once in a while, he'd go heavy to 6 to 8. And very few would he go, quote unquote, lighter between 10 to 12. It was a very old school kind of approach. Then he only trained his chest once a week, and he kept the same workouts, the same exercises for 8 weeks. What this often meant was weeks 5, 6, 7, 8, the progressions he was able to make were very insignificant, if any. So he was actually getting less and less and less growth the more weeks he would repeat those exercises. So he was essentially kind of like wasting time because he was training his chest only once a week, which if you set it up in certain ways, you can train a muscle sooner than that to get faster, like protein synthesis, muscle turnover, muscle growth. You can train it sooner than every 7 days to optimize the speed of muscle growth and turnover. And then also keeping the workouts for 8 weeks was very detrimental. So he was missing a couple days here and there every week. Like he could be training every 5 days rather than every 7. So he was missing 2 days a week. And training the same program for 8 weeks was wasting the last, say, 3 to 4 weeks, in my opinion. So we made some changes, and he just finished his first 4-week program, and he wrote the following. So this was what he sent me in a text. He said, "My chest is crazy pumped in my workouts now, and I've been way more sore. It feels like I'm actually finally training my chest, not just going through the movements." And that was something we talked a lot about, is he didn't have good mind-muscle connection with his chest. He really couldn't feel his chest. He could move some heavy weight, but he really couldn't feel his chest. And that's what we've corrected. So I wanted to share some changes that we've made. I actually have six changes written down here that we made in his training. And I would encourage you, if any of these kind of connect with you, to make these changes in your programming for any lagging body parts that you may have. The first thing we did was use pre-exhaust, so isolations before compounds. This is extremely important, especially if you have short upper arm bones and you're trying to grow your chest. You want to take away a secondary muscle, especially if it actually gets almost the primary focus. So what I mean by that is, if in his presses, he would often fail because he couldn't lock out the weight. And that's actually more of the tricep function in these presses rather than a chest function. So what he was finding was he was taking all of his chest movements to tricep failure, not chest failure. What we decided to do then was to pre-fatigue his chest and essentially bring a weaker and weaker chest into these movements, so that way the chest would fail or get driven further into failure before the triceps would fatigue and fail. The reason why we chose not to fatigue the triceps first is because they're still going to be the more dominant player in his pressing movements. So if he brought weaker triceps to his presses, it doesn't mean that he would have the same performance, but now his chest would do more. He would actually just have less of a performance. He wouldn't be able to do as much weight for as many reps. His chest would still get the same depth of fatigue, but his triceps wouldn't have the great performance, and he just wouldn't be able to push his chest actually as deep into fatigue as he could previously. So we actually want to fatigue the targeted muscle, not the helping muscle. This is important for him, especially because by doing isolations first, by doing cable flies, like machine flies, cable crossovers, there's 1,000,001 variations of all these things. So we're basically dumbbell flies as well. So we're playing with a lot of isolations, and that is allowing him now to have a fatigued and beat up chest as he goes into his pressing movements. And then in his gym, he does have one converging machine, which is great. So we're using that first. And then after that, we're doing any non-converging move, which is currently going to be, currently his first program was 15-degree incline Smith machine presses. But his gym also does have 2 other chest press machines that are non-converging, so we can blend those in as well. And we can also do dumbbell presses. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The reason why I chose to have his converging machine be the primary pressing movement after the chest isolations was that it stabilized for him, and he could really kind of slow his tempo, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, and focus on what the chest was doing. Whereas if we were using dumbbells, there would be less of a mind-muscle connection focus because he has to stabilize. So I wanted to get rid of the stabilization so he could really focus on that mind-muscle connection. So doing isolations before compounds is a great way to fatigue the targeted muscle before any secondary muscles can help out to kind of protect or hide the targeted muscle. Then what we also did was we went high intensity on isolations. Previously, when he was doing flies and stuff before, they were afterthoughts. So his isolations were very low. Like he was trying his best, but at the end of a 4 to 5 exercise workout that was all the same muscle group, there wasn't much to give. So he might be doing, say, dumbbell flies with 40 pounds, whereas now, by doing them first and properly warmed up and blah, 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 he can do them now with like 60 or 70 pounds. And we also can push lower in rep ranges, whereas previously he thought of isolations as best to be done with higher rep ranges. And it's like, sure, that's not bad, but you can also do low rep ranges. And if he's doing them sooner in the workout, early in the workout, he has more to give to that in a safer way. So now we're not opposed to doing machine flies for like 6 to 8 reps. If he's doing dumbbell flies, we're doing those for like 8 to 12. We are playing with his rep ranges and going up over 12 now, but that was a second tip. So the first tip is use pre-exhaust isolations before compounds. The second tip is when you do isolations, do them freaking intense, do them super hard. Do some heavy weights on them, like low rep ranges. You can do high rep ranges, that's totally fine. One of the techniques I like is to basically use an isolation as a warm-up into a working set. So I will do like maybe 2 sets of 16 to 20 reps, 2 sets of 12 to 16, 2 sets of 8 to 12, and then 2 sets of 4 to 8. I actually did that the other day in cable crossovers. Freaking awesome. Destroyed my chest. It was wonderful. That's a lot of sets. It's 8 sets. But my chest was annihilated. And then I went into some slow tempo dumbbell presses, and it worked great. The idea of using pre-exhaust isolations before compounds, then going high intensity on your isolations will really help bring up the lagging body part, regardless of whether it's chest or any other muscles. Then we did slow tempo on compounds, larger rep ranges. We trained his chest more frequently, and we changed his workouts more frequently. Rather than sticking with the same movements for 8 weeks, we switch them now every 4 weeks. So those have been the main changes. So pre-exhaust isolation before compounds, high intensity on his isolations, and then I mentioned slow tempo on his compounds. What was happening before was he was doing his presses like how a strength athlete would do them. The eccentric was kind of quick. The concentric was quick. It was like 1, 2, 3, 4. That was his pacing. And we're like, hold on, slow down. You're a bodybuilder. That's what you're going to get on stage for. We have to build the body, not just move weight. So what I had him do was slow tempos. We did 6 count eccentrics, 6 count concentric. So he would lower 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He would reach the stretch. And then he would press up the same 6 count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he would do a few reps like that, then a few reps at 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Then once you reach failure there, I told him then just crank out a couple reps at whatever speed you can do. So that might be like 1, 1, 1, 1, something like that. Now that technique is called a slow and go. I just made that up. I'm sure somebody else named it and I stole it from them back when I was younger. I kind of forget. But that's the technique we're using now is slow and go. So he's doing 2 to 3 reps with a 6 count, 2 to 3 reps with a 3 count, and then repping out at whatever speed he can. And that's what's creating a lot more soreness, a lot more mind-muscle connection for him now because he's eliminating momentum in the beginning parts of the set. And that's allowing him to actually feel the desired muscle stretch and load with tension and then contract under that tension. You don't want to go too quickly through the work. You're not there to just do 10 reps. You're there to torture the freaking muscle for 10 reps. You have to make sure the muscle feels it. You want to end the set because the muscle is dead, not because you just got to a number. The fourth change we made was larger rep ranges. So rather than just, pressing between, say, 5 to 12, and most commonly for him it was like 8 to 12, we're actually going anywhere between 5 and 20 now. So some of his isolations will do higher rep ranges, 14 to 20. Some of his presses will do higher rep ranges, 14 to 20. But then we also now do some of the isolations, really heavy work, say, 5 to 10, and then still keep some of the compound movements for 5 to 10. We just are more liberal with using both ranges in both styles of movement. Then we're training his chest every 5 days. That's going to allow him, so he trains on average Monday through Friday. Now sometimes he has to make some changes to that. So instead of having a weekly structure, we have just a workout rotation structure. And what it's doing is it's allowing him to prioritize his chest. So he's training his chest every 5 days. And then we're actually changing the workouts he does around those, depending on when the chest workout falls within that week. So the other body parts are actually evolving and revolving around his chest workouts, which are scheduled every 5 days. That's allowing him to maximize his chest growth while the other body parts are still growing, but they're less of a priority because they're further ahead. So we want to get the chest to catch up, and then we would reprioritize everything as, quote unquote, equal. Then the last change we're doing, the 6th one, was we're getting new workouts every 4 weeks rather than every 8. So week 1 is just learn the movements, push yourself to a pretty good intensity, maybe an 8 RPE. So rate of perceived exertion is RPE, and you think of that as like a scale of 5 to 10. 5 is you're moving, but it doesn't hurt at all. 6 is, you're moving, still kind of not doing much. 7 is like, okay, I'm moving. There's starting to be a little bit of a burn to what I'm doing. 8 is I'm moving, and it's definitely burning. This is definitely getting hard. I can do it well. My technique is clean, but it's hard. 9 is my technique is starting to waver. I'm maybe not as perfect with everything. This is really hard. Everything's starting to break down. I'm pretty sure I can do it, but it's really freaking hard to do it. Then 10 is all out, everything you got. So we're not going 10 in week 1. We're going like 8s in week 1. I want him to push himself, but stay super crisp and prioritize learning the technique. Week 2, we push things a little harder, go to like more like a 9 RPE. Then week 3 and 4, 10. Try to push progressions, gain a couple more pounds, a rep here or there, push what you can. And then week 5, we get a whole new program, new movements, new order of things, and then we restart that process. So what this means is every week 3 and 4, he's driving his body really hard into intense failure. But then weeks 1 and 2, He's pulling back a little bit on the intensity, but he's still pushing enough to stimulate adaptation and growth. So if you think of this as like a scale of 1 to 10, we're going at like a rate of like an 8, a 9, 10, 10, 8, 9, 10, 10, 8, 9, 10, 10. So that's the cycle we have going with his intensities, and that's mitigating any acute small injury issues, and it's helping him push his progressions where every single workout he's progressing by loading more weight or by loading into a new movement pattern. So this is allowing him, as he said, again, this is a quote, "My chest is crazy pumped in my workouts now, and I've been way more sore. It feels like I'm actually finally training my chest, not just going through the movements." So these were 6 adjustments that we made that he's absolutely loved, and we're going to keep them going. So I wanted to share those in today's podcast. Pre-exhaust isolation before compounds, high intensity on isolations, slow tempo on compounds, larger rep ranges, 5 to 20, train the desired body part every 5 days. You could probably argue doing every 4, and then new workouts every 4 weeks. Awesome. If you have any questions, if you need anything, reach out. My email is brutalironGym@gmail.com. If you're interested in coaching, this is what I do. So if you want a program that's specific to you and your body type, your anatomy, you want help with nutrition, all that stuff, just let me know in an email, brutalironGym@gmail.com. I'll talk through whatever you're struggling with, and we'll figure it out, okay? You can learn more about our services on our website as well, which is www.brutalironGym.com. Great. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. More people share it with, more people can help. If you like the podcast, you can consider donating to support the podcast. You can do that on the website, or you can go to Nutricost.com to buy your supplements. Use the code BrutalIron10. You're going to get a 10% discount, and then 10% of whatever you spend gets kicked back to us as a commission. So that's a great way to donate to the podcast as well. If you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.